So this will be episode 1 of Strength and Conditioning, Truth and Consequences. I'm Greg Walsh. We're here with Paul Roberts and CJ Mansfield from Sect in Salt Lake City, Utah. And today we're just going to talk about a handful of the things that have happened since we all met, a handful of things that we see in the general strength and conditioning community, and probably share a few stories that have very little to do with strength and conditioning. There are a trillion podcasts out there, probably 750 billion too many. And the only difference that we want to put forth now is talking to people once a month that have both connecting and dissenting viewpoints in the interest of not necessarily being right, but in the interest of sharing information and perspectives that otherwise wouldn't have landed either on the participants in the conversation or maybe to you all. A lot of the people that we'll talk to are people that otherwise are going to fly a little bit under the radar, and that's mostly by their own design. Those are people that we have a gigantic amount of respect for. People that have opted for social media non-disposability. Largely people that have opted for an intentional amount of less conventional success based on being discerning about what they put out, how much, and the quality. So using these guys as a great example of that, say hello to whoever the hell is going to be listening to this thing. And then first of all, let's talk just quickly about when Sect started and where you two came from to bring you to what I consider like mixed modality fitness that transfers outside of a gym. And how about Paul first?
Awesome. Yeah, super stoked to be here, and it's really cool to reconnect with Greg. We've had kind of this ongoing relationship for quite a while now, and it gets even cooler. Every month that passes, even though we are remote, super stoked to have that kind of connection and that tie. And it's really cool to meet friends that share common beliefs and common practices. So really, thank you for being here.
Us too. Short list.
The question of when it started is a hard one. We've really been, and we've been an organization and an actual had like an LLC for a little over 2 years now. But from my opinion and my perspective, the thing started way before that when I worked at a previous gym and started obtaining people and friends and family members and acquaintances that I really liked working with. And that's really what I look at as far as the initiation of the kind of project. But formally, we started in, that would be April of 2017. So the project itself is in its infancy still. It's pretty young considering. That being said, like I mentioned, the thing started well beyond that. I mean, CJ and I have been friends for a long time, and he's been trying to kill me ever since, and I'm just trying to repay that due.
I'm getting close. Getting closer.
We always think about, or at least my perspective on things that I find valuable is they almost always have an inciting incident that was far beyond when the world ever saw what they see now. People ask me when things that we've done have started, and it's almost like there's really no great answer, because if they're organic and they're meant to be, they've started so long before we actually present them. So I get that. Yeah, I think that's how I perceive what you guys are up to. And then what that tells me also is that the first time I met you guys was not long after you had started. So just to editorialize for a second, the first time I met them, it really seemed like they had their shit totally together. So the fact that it was so don't laugh. We'll just laugh for an hour. But it really seemed like they had the project together. They had a great group, and in its infancy, something like that presenting convincingly to someone like me is impressive in its own right.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Like what the sect is, and kind of our thing is it's way more than just a physical space and more than a gym, and it's built on camaraderie, friends and family, and these ties that have existed for decades. Even though the formal organization have you is only 2 years old, it's definitely been around for kind of as long as we've been around.
Yeah, the group we've been training with has more or less been together for quite some time before this even started. And that's actually the reason why this came to fruition, was because of necessity of, hey, we want to keep this thing going. We better find a space.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Yep. Well, one of my takeaways before I met you and when we started talking, but when I hadn't yet met you guys, and then especially after being at your place several times now, and something that I'm kind of hyper aware of because I came from an early days CrossFit background, but also even further before that was martial arts and things, and it was always a really easy distinction to make places that had kind of like a manufactured community versus places that really felt like a true community that kind of had a behind the scenes camaraderie that had nothing to do with simply one specific training day or not, either in person or social media cheerleading or something like that. And while there's value to support in all colors, it really stands out when it feels like something deeper than what I had seen at most places. A lot of camaraderie based facilities, it's really just, in my opinion, it's really just a masquerade. Everyone just wants to win the workout and show off in different ways and stuff like that. And just a quick story on our side with that was early in our current facility, we had some really significant floods, like biblical fucking floods, and we would have anyone that was nearby helping us. The crew from our landlord was helping us and things like that. And a simple distinction to make was there were certain people that would come in and immediately just start trying to figure out how they could still train amidst this crazy chaos of us trying to move anything that wasn't tied down so it didn't get ruined and all this kind of stuff. And I've always made a mental note of that because it just shows really kind of a true priority versus, like I mentioned, kind of like a manufactured priority. But anyway, I have not felt that at your place, barring one or two individuals ever since, and I'm quite sure I would never feel it there again. So, yeah, pat on the back for that.
Thank you.
We take pride in that, and we try to really insulate the people that come through that door. One or two might slip through that aren't meant to be, but they're usually quickly weeded out because people throw around words like brotherhood and family and all of that, pretty manufactured. But I truly spend more time with these people in this building than I do with anybody else, and when the rubber meets the road, we've switched locations a couple times. We've had workouts in parks, and every single person is here putting in whatever work, whatever talent they have to use. They've offered it up to the people here just to keep this thing going. And it means a lot to see that. And so, the manufactured brotherhood isn't even, it doesn't exist because, like I said, we've been supporting each other through this, whatever this is, for quite some time now. And it's been great.
I can relate to that. It's a different feeling. And then just so the people listening know, though, it's a public gym. You vet new trainees and new members, but by no means is it closed circuit. It's not a private club. It's very similar to Wolf Brigade in that way. We may be slightly less on the vetting side, but if you come in and force people to learn before they apply, it will weed its own out. And there's a lot of value to that, and it's it's the old idea of it only takes one bad egg to ruin the dozen, but it takes much more than one to make the dozen. We think about that all the time. So anyway, yeah, that was a big takeaway from me in talking to you guys, and then finally being there. The fact that the ideals met from not in-person conversations to in-person and visitations is another new challenge for me. People paint themselves as a lot of things that they really aren't, you know.
Oh, it's so true, and that's also I really admire you for that too, Greg, because it seems, and maybe it's in these industries that we're in, but it seems like there's so many fake people out there that don't practice what they preach or don't live what they say the way they live. And it's really refreshing to meet those people that actually are what they say they are. Especially, I don't know what it is, if it's in this industry or what the case may be, but it does seem uncommon nowadays. And it's really refreshing to meet those people that are truthful, and not only in their words but also in their actions and what they display and who they are and how they act.
Well, I think about that a lot because I guess I'm always trying to see why the negative sides of things that I see are occurring. So even if someone isn't trying hard, or if someone isn't picking up something that we're laying down in training or something, I don't always just dismiss it as them. I always look back to, okay, what are we doing that contributes to that unsuccessful mission that we're on? And so I think a lot about that. And realistically, to stand out in this world, you have to say things in a specific way. And a lot of times I think what people might not realize at the time is saying them a specific way and being them are two totally different things. One is relatively easy. The other is never, ever easy. And that's what we see. We see a lot of these days is, you know, I'm thankful for it, but we get a lot of people coming through to train with us, and a strange amount of communication online and things like that. And as you mentioned, it is very seldom the same in person as it is in cyberspace or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it's few and far between, but it makes you appreciate the ones you find. And something else that I took away from you guys initially, and then was reinforced when we met, was really for both of you these non-singular expertise. So you both work really hard in the gym. You both pay a ton of attention. You've both achieved levels of success in you know, martial arts and strength training and things like that. But to me, it's the idea of care begetting care. So you know, Paul, you know, you're a firefighter. You've built this business. You've got this great family. You know, CJ is like a master craftsman and has this great family and all these other skills that, in my opinion, it just goes to show that care and expertise transcend one singular application. And that's something else that I see less and less of. Is I see people that might be, you know, really phenomenal at one aspect of something in the gym, but they're just in general totally unappealing people, totally like, you know, singular entities. And again, in this day and age, I feel like that's more of a liability than a value. I don't really give a shit how much someone can barbell snatch if that's the only thing that they do well in life. Yeah. So you two have been a great example of that too, and I know that a lot of people that we know are also super impressed with that. So I just wanted to highlight that.
I think the biggest thing is we, you know, especially me, started this out of necessity. I had no interest in being a fitnesser, you know, or
yeah. You and me both, man.
Show off of Instagram or whatever. Really, it came down to necessity. It came to, I was getting to a point where I was beat up and had to do something to maintain what I like to do outside of the gym, and then it just has snowballed from there, I guess. So
yeah, exactly the same with me. Exactly the same with me. Yeah.
I think one thing that you touched on, Greg, which I think makes a huge difference, is care. And you're right. Like the people that exceed at whatever they're doing are the people that truly care about it, right? Like it's if the care is not there, there's no motivation to sustain or to be committed to whatever your endeavor you're engaging in, right? Whether that is barbell snatching or starting a project like what we have or whatever. And another thing that I wanted to touch on, which is really cool, is when you talked about your floods and the people coming out to help. Like this project, like CJ said, would not exist without the people that are around here. And it's kind of funny, like this thing has started from a spot of, like CJ said, of necessity. Like we're all just friends and family that want to have a kick-ass place to train and work hard together. So we needed it. So we just built it, essentially. You know what I mean? And it was really easy because to be involved initially, there was nothing to be involved with. So the people that were around actually cared enough that it wasn't for any like notoriety or like Instagram posts or whatever. It was like when it was formed, and again, it's only been 2 years. Everyone that has been around was around because they ultimately care about whatever this thing is. You know, I hate definitions because the minute you define something, you limit what it can be. But I keep going back to like a project or whatever you want to call it. It's definitely not a business, because if it's a business, we're doing things wrong.
Believe me, I get that too.
But yeah, it's really cool to be a part of. It's really cool to see. And again, that's the only reason this whole thing even happened, was because of that support. Because when it came down to the point where it was like, okay, I don't know what we're gonna do, and it was like, well, where are you going? What are you doing? And it was like, well, we'll find a place, we'll build it.
The funny thing about that is when we found out we were moving from the initial, 6 years ago, something like that. It didn't even take an hour. We all sat down and we're like, okay, what's next? Where do we go? What do we do? We had a makeshift plan figured out within minutes, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about the community that we've been lucky enough to surround ourselves with, is there's so many people that have so many different talents and different strengths that one guy's like, oh yeah, I know a place. Oh, I can do this, I can do that. And so it just naturally came together and at a breakneck speed, which was pretty shocking.
Yeah, it was shocking for us to watch from here. I mean, I know that I was communicating with you guys during that time, and the turnaround was something else. I mean, we all knew that in both of these instances you would pull it off, but the quality and I guess the brevity with which you were able to turn that thing around was interesting, and it doesn't, and in a sense it doesn't really surprise me, because that resourcefulness is something that I really feel like is a real defining factor in your place, and something else too that I've taken away is that you both, and I believe that this probably trickles down into the people that you're training with, is that you're both really, like, naturally is always such a strange word, but naturally good at things, and yet still striving and checking the boxes and coming here in the most dastardly pieces of winter and things like that to practice your craft and improve and things like that. And that's really admirable to me in fitness and in strength and conditioning. Most people are really content with being good enough to make money, and that nuanced, obsessive, detailed progression is I mean, it's a dead art, believe me. I mean, we're at the forefront of it, and I think I probably, as much as we get a ton of great support, I am quite sure I get equal amounts of criticism for it. So again, that's just something else I took away, and I have a lot of respect for, is you're not resting on laurels. maybe because neither of you's killed each other yet, and you've got to stay one up on each other. But for whatever reason, it's impressive. It's admirable.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things that you touched on is that the resourcefulness, and CJ talked about it too. Is one of the ways that this happened so quick, and that we're able to do that is because I think a lot of people are too quick to want to do everything on their own, and we all have strengths and weaknesses. And one of the keys that I try to really do is I know that I have weaknesses, and I need help, and I need some people around to help make up for those weaknesses. And if we think that we're the best at everything, we're just completely wrong. And it's been awesome. And like CJ said, if you're willing to just open up a little bit and let people learn how to be resourceful and utilize those strengths to everyone's benefit, the project and the entirety is so much stronger if you're able to do that.
I mean, I think about it as self-correction, but with direction. So when I'm thinking about that in terms of actually training someone specific, at some point, and we have kind of like this hierarchy on the wall of attendance versus percentage of responsibility. And in my opinion, it's one of the most valuable charts on the wall. Most people probably look right past it, but after a certain point, and it goes back to something you said earlier, after a certain point, as long as you don't have some sort of actual, tangible limitation, you either learn or you don't learn because you don't care. And so that kind of self-correction with direction is that. So we can stand and let someone learn on their own and add assistance when we need to. But if you hold their hand the whole time, they never really learn. It's the same. If you never pull the trigger, the bullet never fires. So I respect that again too, for sure. So your new place. If people want to be a part of what you guys are doing, tell me about how that works. Tell me about how that works without sounding mean and exclusionary.
Yeah, it's kind of hard, but you're exactly right. And it's hard to explain. But really, so what we have for kind of our onboarding or new members. We have what's called the probationary period, and we refer to them as probies. And that has a lot of history, and that's directly derived from the fire industry and kind of my background there. And it's in place for numerous reasons. One is really in place to protect what we do have here as far as the people, and they're definitely the top priority. And as history, our short history shows, everyone that's around is committed, and that's really what I want. Is I want people around that want to be around, that are committed, and I think it's something that lacks in a lot of atmospheres, such as kind of fitness, is the commitment to one thing or one project or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of gyms out there where you can drop in and out whenever you see fit, and there's really no commitment there. Or there's gyms that offer a free month membership just to get people in the door, and that's really not what this thing's about. It's about wanting to be a part of the project. And also in the style of work we do, what I've seen in my past is, it's hard work. It's hard work, and a lot of people are apprehensive about it. And they start down the path, and then, they may get discouraged and quit before they really see the value of it. And this way, this is essentially, it's a 3-month kind of probationary period. It's a 3-month onboarding. And with that, the person, is labeled that probie, and that's not meant to be demeaning term. In fact, like when I was a probie as a firefighter, I loved it. Like I loved that attention, because that means I'm there to learn, and I'm there, and everyone expects that of me, right?
That's important to know. It's not meant to demean anybody or put anybody down or look lower. It's meant to be like, okay, this is a new person. You know, like something that I picked up when I went out to your gym, actually. I think the words were act like a normal human, say hi to people.
Yeah.
You know, that's basically like one of those things like, hey, give these people a little extra attention. You know, they're new at this, welcome them. They're not doing anything different than the rest of us. They're in workouts with myself. They're in workouts with Paul. They're in workouts, you know, we're not having them do anything different, you know, depending on where they're starting in their you know, fitnessing, whatever you want to call it. But it's not meant to be demeaning in any way.
So it's not hazing. It's just environmental protection. It's environmental insulation. Yeah,
and
that's how
way,
I view it.
Yeah, it's also a way to it's a way to earn something, and it's something that I tremendously value. Is I don't necessarily like the things that I can just go buy. I want to be a part of something where you earn your space, you earn your spot, and that by no means is trying to be like pushing people away. In fact, the people that are in, and I'm pretty sure that everyone would attest to this, that there's no sort of like pushing away. It's like we're here to help you, but you're also going to be responsible. And we're here to help you through whatever process that may be. But it is an assistance. It requires something on your end.
Yeah, and you know, we have a kind of a ceremony where at the end they do a workout, and there's some parameters that they're trying to hit, but it's not a hit this number or hit the road kind of thing. It's, you know, we're looking for somebody that has made improvements, that is put in the work. You can tell when somebody's putting in the work, putting in the effort, putting in the commitment to do something. So it's not like you come in, you better work out, you better hit this number or you're out. You know, that's just basically a way to make them feel like they earn their spot in this community, you know, and at the end of that workout, we have like a little celebration where we'll burn the Proby shirt, give them their Sect shirt, and it's a way to make them feel a little more welcome, like they earned their spot, right?
And I mean, it's the only unusual thing about this conversation is that we're trying to glad hand it in 2018, but it's probably a conversation that would have been better suited for like the 1940s or the 1950s. You know, in older times, older eras, the idea of earning your position or having aspirational goals, it was not unusual. You know, so now the fact that a lot of gyms that on paper or with a really broad brush look similar to what either of us do, really just kind of take whoever and torture them for money. And a lot of times I think the reason that they have to take so many members and like you mentioned, the randoms that drop in once and stuff like that is they're underqualified to teach what they're teaching, and they're upside down on a loan for equipment, or they're upside down on a loan for a building. So they have to put warm bodies in there or they're out. So I think that self-correcting is important, but people often don't make the distinction between that and this, or that and this, or something like that. And I think that's important too. I mean, having to prove yourself, as long as it's done in a respectful way, is in no way negative. You know, it's one of those things that will continue to confound me is how that can be looked at as anything other than a benefit to both sides of the equation. But
you're right. And I often think that I was born in the wrong century, because my mentality doesn't seem like it adheres to a lot of the policies and procedures and everything that's common. And you know, one of the things that I wanted to highlight there is that back to like having people that want to be around and measuring that commitment is something that I truly value. And it goes back to because the people that are around here, we are completely committed to them. So we expect that kind of back. I really personally value that reciprocation. of like, if you're here, I'll tell you what, and I mean, it's been proven that I will do everything I possibly can for the people that are here. And I don't want people that are just that are not committed. Does that make sense?
So a way that we phrase that is, we don't want people that want to be somewhere. We want people that want to be here.
Yeah. Totally.
And man, of course. So I completely understand that. I mean, and when that's not the case, it's the same as tired versus lazy. In that,
Yeah.
if you're looking, it's so easy to identify the difference.
It goes back to probably terrible businessmen, because, you know, traditional gym models, they focus on signing people up and almost counting on them not showing up, you know,
Yeah.
just getting those people to sign up, monthly fee, but not really coming to the door. And here, you know, we want people here, and because, you know, that's who's going to push us. That's who, you know, nothing is more gratifying than seeing these people come in here and see their wide eyes on what they have to do for the day. And then, you know, a month, 2 months later, they're like just smashing it, you know.
I agree so completely. I couldn't even describe it in words, but really, to be able to give teeny tiny details that someone applies, and that actually cares enough to consider when they're tired, when they're compromised, or whatever, it tells you an awful lot about that person. Really, in general, way outside of the training realms too. That's how I know. I mean, there's certain people that train with us that are, I don't want to say they're not my friends, because that sounds wrong, but they're not people that I would ever otherwise associate with. But just based on how they interact and the care that they put forth in what they're doing, and how attentive they are in listening, I know that if I needed them for something, that they would unequivocally be there. And that's also kind of a dead art. I've trained at lots of places, and especially in the last like handful of years, you know, taught at a bunch of places and things, and it's different, man. It's I don't know, it's like it's now, and it's as you mentioned too, it's almost a bad business model to not be that. But I just don't give a fuck. I mean, I would rather fail than suck, and I would rather do a great job for one person than a mediocre job for 1,000 people. And it's like it, you know, people think that's like some blind idealism or something, but it just isn't. It's just I just don't care about the 1,000 people. I wish I could make myself, but I just don't. And I know that you guys are the same way in that respect, you know.
And it's one of those things, anybody that I've seen that's worth their salt in this type of industry never arrives. Is always trying to better how they're training people, or how they're training themselves, or whatever. I mean, I remember a conversation me and Paul had when he first started training people, and he had, I think it was like military guys and some guys that are like exercise, have their exercise doctorates, and he's like, what the fuck am I going to teach these guys? You know, these guys know way more. And that's what I, you know, look up to Paul. He doesn't give himself enough credit for what he knows, and the ability he has to figure out what that person needs to progress in whatever goal they have in this realm. And, you know, everybody that trains here or is a trainer here really puts in that effort to try to make sure, A, they know what they're talking about. B, they're really trying to push these people ahead to help them achieve their goals, whatever that is. You know, we've got people that are training for a variety of different things. And
Yeah.
funny, we'll sit down and be like, okay, this person has this. And you just start seeing this information and people spitballing ideas on what would be a good way to help that person get to whatever point they're trying to get to. So
And it's come up even more recently, but as you mentioned, you get people with, you know, all these high level credentials and things like that. What I'm learning more and more every day is that, you know, paper is paper, but pavement is pavement. And, you know, one does not resemble the other. And the more you stare at one, the less you understand the other. And that's kind of something that I think is a tough distinction to make on the internet, because everyone thinks that they know a lot that they don't know. and they're not willing to vet it because vetting it is fucking hard. So
it takes a lot of time and energy and effort.
Yeah, and pain and things that most people are not willing to put up with. But I guess in a sense that's good for both of us, because the way that I think about that too is good. We're just going to continue to pull further and further ahead until there's no way they can catch up. So one thing I'm going to try and do, as long as it makes sense at the end of each of these, is take a quote from us and rattle it off, because I think it's something that relates to you guys. And the one that I chose for today is simply: effort is one of life's few remaining unsliding scales.
Mm-hmm.
We wrote that on the board many years ago, and I've thought about it a lot when it comes to you guys. And if you have a kind of a closing thought on that statement, I think that would be great. And then I'll just end with you guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll do this once a month with a handful of different people. So Paul and CJ, on that effort quote.
Oh, that's I think as far as effort goes in general, back to something that is kept coming up consistently, even in this hour and in whatever we do. People don't want to put in the effort for long periods of time anymore. It's a society, and anymore everyone wants everything right now. They're not willing to put in the effort needed or commit to the effort needed to actually progress. And that can be with your personal life, with your relationships, with fitness, whatever it is. All of this shit and everything that is worthwhile does take effort. And it takes a lot of it for a long period, for a lot longer than you anticipate. So if, what I try to do is I try to realize that, and I don't expect anything to come easy. And if it does, it's not worth anything.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
That's perfect.
You can't expect the reward for effort you didn't put in. You gotta put in the work for the reward. So.
Well, sadly, I think the last 2 minutes could have been the entire podcast, and it still would have been worthwhile. Thank you guys so much. Again, thank you for your contributions to a toxic fitness industry, and for a great conversation, and for a great couple of years of friendship so far. And we'll see you again soon. And please find these guys. Social media is easy to find. Website's easy to find. And thanks for listening to episode 1.
Thank you.
Thank you.